Hey everyone, welcome back to another PNSO review. Today we'll be taking a look at their prehistoric animal models, Brian the Pachyrhinosaurus. This figure is available on Amazon. It retails for just over $20, and I'll leave a link to that Amazon listing in the description. So it's been kind of a wild ride getting these new PNSO figures in from Amazon. I actually ordered this Pachyrhinosaurus later than four other figures I haven't received yet, and I guess those are just floating around customs as we speak. I guess it's just a mess down there. But anyways, I'm happy to finally get this figure in. The Prehistoric Animal Models line has taken a life of its own lately. You know, when PNSO first came around, they were known for their large hollow vinyl figures. Then they had their very extensive mini line. Then they had their museum quality line with those nice bases for their figures. And then over the last few months, it seems like this line is their main priority, which I'm fine with because these figures are very moderately priced, usually around that $20 to $40 price range. So that is very easy on the wallet. So before we take a look at Brian, let's just go over the packaging really quick. It comes in this little cardboard box. You got a production shot of Brian on the front right here. You got PNSO, Prehistoric Animal Model line. Number 30 is Brian in the line. And then on top of the box, you just have a headshot of Brian. And on the other side, it is in Chinese. And that will do it for the box. And then you get a little pamphlet with some art of Brian on the front. And then opening it up, you get some information on Pachyrhinosaurus. This side is in Chinese, and then this side is in English. And then right here in the top corner, you can see the skeletal of Pachyrhinosaurus. So that will do it for the packaging. Let's take a closer look at this figure. So let's start off with a nice 360-degree view of Brian. This is a nice Pachyrhinosaurus. It is not perfect. I do have a couple issues with this figure, which we'll get into later on. But the pose of this figure is pretty nice. You got the tail sweeping to the side and the head looking in the other direction. It's slightly lowered like the animal is about to browse or take a drink. So let's just do a couple quick measurements on this figure. This figure is 7¼ inches if you measure it along the curve in its tail, and about 2¾ inches tall to the top of the frill. So Pachyrhinosaurus is estimated between 16 and 26 feet long for the larger species. So that put this figure somewhere in the 126 to the 143 scale range. Moving on to the color scheme, I have to say PNSO has really stepped it up with painting these figures from the Prehistoric Animal Models line. I feel like the first few figures that we got last year, the paintwork was very lacking, especially when compared to the museum quality line. The main body coloration is a mixture of browns. It gives the figure a very naturalistic look. On the back of it, you got some black stripes that run down. You got a little bit of like rusty orange around the neck region. And then on the underside, you have a mixture of orange and white for the belly. And then going up to the face, the boss on this Pachyrhinosaurus is painted in a reddish color. And you have some nice dark wash all over the figure to bring out all that beautiful scale detail. Moving on to the head, you can tell by these three spikes right here that this Pachyrhinosaurus is sculpted after the species Lacustae, just like every other Pachyrhinosaurus available on the market. There are two other species, Paratorum and Canadensis. What makes Pachyrhinosaurus unique is instead of having nasal horns and brow horns, it had this bony boss that covered its snout and the eyes. Now, the problem I have with this figure is Lacustae, the boss is the wrong shape. It almost looks like a mix between Canadensis and Lacustae. And the other problem is the boss runs into the boss on the eyes. There was actually a gap between the boss and the brow boss on Lacustae. So it's a very odd choice to model it after the species and have the boss on the nose run into the boss above the eyes. But I will say the boss is beautifully sculpted, and I actually really like this reddish color that they gave it. They have a nice dark wash over it to bring out all that beautiful detail. And my favorite part about the figure is the light blue eyes. I love blue eyes on dinosaurs. I think it really makes the eyes on them pop. The horns in the middle of the skull are very sharp. If you just like poke your finger on it, it is a very sharply sculpted spike and is painted in a grayish color and slowly tapers to white. Has a nice shiny coat over it, and then the horns on the top of the frill are also sharp and very beautifully sculpted. There's a lot of beautiful scale variation on the frill, and then going down to the mouth, you can see the nose is sculpted really well. Here is the beak, and you can clearly see the mouth sculpted in. And then going down to the neck, this figure has a very thick and wide neck full of all heavy muscles to carry that very heavy skull. And then going down to the feet, this is another problem I have with this figure. The front feet are very elephant looking, and I guess I'm kind of spoiled from Safari's figures. I just like the look of this is their Nasutoceratops. I think the feet on Safari's ceratopsians are much better done than it is on this Pachyrhinosaurus. I actually looked up ceratopsian trackways. There's not many of them, but from what I can tell, the front feet of ceratopsians left a half moon shape imprint, kind of like similar to sauropods. So when you turn the figure over, the bottom of the feet is very flat and elephant-like looking. Maybe it's just me being nitpicky, but I kind of hold PNSO to a higher standard than other companies because they have some very excellent paleo artists working for them. You can see a lot of beautiful scale detail along the body. They have a nice patch of osteoderms that run along the main body that continue all the way down to the tip of the tail. The hind legs are beautifully sculpted, a lot of thick muscles sculpted in here. This figure is not shrink wrapped at all. It's a very chunky looking Pachyrhinosaurus, and I absolutely love how it looks. And then on the underside, you can see some nice scale variation. For the stomach, it really is a very little cloaca slit right there. We always got to check our dino bum holes, and the tail is also nicely sculpted. So yeah, it's a nice Pachyrhinosaurus figure, but like I said, those two issues with the shape of the boss and the front feet are just kind of bugging me. But other than that, it's a nice figure. All right, let's move on with some comparisons. First up are some Pachyrhinosaur figures from other companies. First up is the Batat Pachyrhino, which is a very chunky figure. And next up is the very rare now Papo Pachyrhino. And lastly, here it is with the Safari limited Pachyrhinosaurus. And I absolutely love this figure. I think Doug Watson does some of the best ceratopsian figures on the market. And you can clearly see all four of these figures are clearly sculpted after the species. Lacuste, they all have those three horns in the middle of their frill. And, picking amongst these four figures, I'm going with the Safari as the best Pachyrhinosaurus. I think this figure is absolutely beautiful, and you can definitely see the gap between the boss on the nose and the bosses on the eyes. And next up is the Papo Styracosaurus. Papo always seems to do a good job with their ceratopsians. And next up is the PNSO Spinops. Now, this figure came out last year, and I think these two figures, it's almost like a night and day difference. The sculpting on the Spinops is, I'm not saying it's crude, but this one is definitely so much more detailed, and they both cost about the same price. So, like I said, PNSO is definitely stepping up their games with this Prehistoric Animal Models line. And one more PNSO ceratopsian. Here is their mini Chasmosaurus. And next up is the PNSO Wilson T-Rex, and I think these two figures look really nice in scale with each other. And lastly, can't do a comparison without comparing Pachyrhinosaurus to Triceratops. Here is the PNSO Triceratops, and I think these two figures scale beautifully with each other. And lastly, here it is with the Wild Pass Protoceratops. So it's nice to display these three figures next to each other. It really shows the size difference between ceratopsians. So final thoughts on this figure. I think it's a good Pachyrhinosaurus. Like I said, my couple gripes are just the shape of the front feet and the shape of the boss, because like I said, they were clearly sculpting this after Pachyrhinosaurus lacuste, and it's just the shape does not match up for me. And it would be nice in the future if some other companies would like to give Paratrome and Canadensis some love. Could be nice to display the different species of Pachyrhinosaurus on your shelves. But I'll say the sculpting and detail on this figure is absolutely fantastic. It's definitely worth the $20 price point. PNSO's really stepped it up with this line with their paintwork and detail, so I'm really excited to see what the future of this line is. And like I said at the beginning of the review, the link to Amazon to order this figure is in the description. And hopefully the 4 figures I ordered before this Pachyrhinosaurus gets released from custom soon, because I'm really excited to get my hands on those, especially the Hadrosaurs. So that would do it for the review. As always, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, show your support by hitting that subscription button just below the video. Each subscription helps out the channel tremendously, and it's greatly appreciated. And I'll see you guys for the next one.